Here, so we will get started. I will officially call to order the regular School Board of Education meeting for April 25th, 2022. If you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Dahman, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
There are no changes to the agenda.
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion on the floor made by Dave, seconded by Rick to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on that? All in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to item number D. I just want to confirm that both Rick and John have taken their official oath of office. They've signed the correct paperwork, and that's all up to speed. I'd like to welcome Rick back to the board. We look forward to continuing to work with you, and to welcome John to the board. We look forward to getting to know you and to also working with you. It's nice to see your family out there tonight to support you. So thank you both for your service to the board. Appreciate your willingness to be on the board. We'll move down to item E, election of board officers and CISA 2 delegate. I will open up nominations. We'll start with the president. I'll open up nominations for president.
I'll nominate Joe Martin to be board president.
I'll second that.
Don't really need a second on nominations.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No, it's okay. Any other nominations for president? Last call for nominations for president.
I'd like to make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Joe Martin to be board president.
Is there a second for that?
Well, I'll second it this time.
Thank you, Dave. There's a motion on the floor made by Rick, seconded by Dave to close nominations and cast a unanimous vote for Joe Martin for president. Any discussion? All in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Before I officially pass on the gavel, I would like to say a few words. It's been an interesting year, and it's been an honor to serve as president alongside all of you. Not you, John, but the rest of the members. I look forward to working with you in the future. Some of you know that I have familial responsibilities that are taking up a tremendous amount of my time, and this position requires a tremendous amount of time. So, Joe, I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're willing to take on the role, and you know how much time this takes. So on behalf of the board, thank you for your willingness to do that. And I will now give you the gavel and switch places.
You can stay there.
Yeah,
I'll just give you the gavel then.
That is fine. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to serve in this role. So we will continue with the election, and my dad, some things are gonna take a little work. Thank you, dear. I'm unmuted. We will continue with the election in procedural order. We will go to vice president next. I will declare open the nominations for vice president of the board.
I nominate Rick Ballin for vice president.
Rick, do you accept?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Are there other nominations for vice president? And third call, nominations for vice president of the board. And I hear none. It would be procedurally correct to move to close and cast a unanimous ballot for Rick, if that's your pleasure.
I would move as you just presented.
I'll second.
Motion from Dave, seconded by Mike, to close nominations for vice president and cast a unanimous ballot for Mr. Rick Mullen. Discussion on that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Welcome, Mr. Rick, back to your familial role. We will move down to board clerk. And I will declare open nominations for clerk of the board.
I nominate Shelley Kroll-Hankey to be the board clerk.
And Shelley, would you accept that nomination? Are there other nominations for board clerk? And third and final call for nominations for board clerk. And I see none.
Mr. President, I will make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous vote for Shelley Krelhenke for the position of clerk.
I'll second that.
Motion from Mike, seconded by Dave, to close nominations for clerk and unanimously vote in Shelley Krelhenke for board clerk. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Congratulations. Welcome back to that role, Shelley. We will declare open nominations for treasurer.
I nominate Mike Hoffman to be board treasurer.
And Mike, do you accept that nomination?
I will.
Mhm. Are there other nominations for board treasurer? And third and final call for nominations for treasurer of the board.
I'll make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Mike Hoffman to be board treasurer.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, seconded by Dave, to close nominations for treasurer and cast a unanimous ballot for Mike Hoffman. Discussion on that? I see none. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. Welcome back to that role, Mr. Mike, as you capably handled a year ago. So pleased to have you doing that. And then we will move to, we have two other positions we have to elect technically,
Just a CISA 2 delegate.
and we appoint the WASB delegate. Perfect. Thank you, Kim, for correcting me on that. So we elect a CISA 2 delegate.
I nominate Jennifer Johns to be our CISA 2 delegate.
Jennifer, I think we had checked with and was willing to do that and continue in that role. Are there other nominations for our CISA 2 delegate? And third call? And I see none. We could entertain a close and unanimous cast if we want.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous vote for Jennifer Johns for the CISA 2 representative.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from Mike, seconded by Rick, to close nominations for CISA 2 delegate and cast a unanimous ballot for Jennifer Johns to fill that role. Discussion? And all in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Jennifer, we will congratulate you when we are able to do so. Okay, that concludes the election of the officers. Welcome everyone to your familial roles, or I don't think anyone's in a new role technically, so we should be in real good shape to get our business done. We will move down to F, which is action on the minutes from our previous meeting.
I would move to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on April 11th, 2022 as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from Dave, seconded by John, to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. Are there any questions or discussion? I see none. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Next is vouchers. Those are, as were the minutes, included in board docs for any detail that would be needed.
I'll make a motion to approve general checking account vouchers totaling $889,599.64 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion from Mike, seconded by Rick, to approve general checking account vouchers for $889,599.64 as we have in board docs. Are there questions or discussion on that motion? I see none. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. The vouchers are taken care of. And student council report, but I think we are lacking our student council reps, so we will eagerly look forward to visiting with them when they can join us again. Next up is public comment, and we have a speaker signed up for us for public comment. So we will welcome the lone signer is Heather Moore. If Heather wants to come to the podium.
kindly check that it's unmuted and share with us your thoughts, please. You find it? Thank you, Jackie.
Hello, board members. This apparently is not my first go around. I've seen you guys for the past couple of years on this one issue. Unfortunately, last year I was unable to attend when you guys made these decisions, but every single board member has heard from me or my husband during the past 2 years since decisions have been made regarding busing transportation with regards to the school zone implementation. So why I'm here again is because on the agenda, you guys are finding out for an increase in the buy a seat. As an in-district resident who has gracefully asked over the past few years for my kids to stay in the school that my son started in, which is Consolidated. Consolidated is the closest school to my home, even though my home is zoned west. We have been granted this for the past couple of years. My hope is that we are granted again. But when it comes to the buy a seat program, as an in-district resident, even if my pickup is at a daycare provider inside the Consolidated school zone, I have to buy a seat. Now there's another trick to this. So even if I was to lose being able to keep my kids at Consolidated and them go to West, me choosing to use my daycare provider, which is located in the Consolidated school zone, although she is approved for busing transportation to West, I would have to still pay buy a seat because this board chose on a policy that would require the busing from my child care provider either through the school zone request form, which I've made it easy. The bus is already an established bus stop. My daycare provider's child already goes to that school, and yet I have to buy a seat. If I were to, this is less than a mile to the school and back, to be able to transport my child 7 miles or almost 8 miles from my daycare provider to West, I'm required to do that. But to be able to bus my child from my home where I don't have morning and afternoon care, I wouldn't have to pay anything, and it's 5 miles. So if someone can please do the math, that would be great. You guys all asked for us parents to reach out to the administration, try to come to a compromise. I've offered compromises to the administration. They have chosen to disregard them or say, we're not going to do this at this point in time, or this or that or the other. As a in-district resident, it's frustrating because we try to communicate with our board members. Usually the typical response is from the administration. Very rarely do any families hear from board members. I think the last email communication, I did get 2 board members respond back to me. You want the community to be able to engage in you. You want the community to be able to trust you, and you want the community to be able to come to some kind of compromise. I had a previous employer who always told me, the art of compromise is when everybody comes to the table and nobody leaves happy. So I would encourage this board to really look at the buy a seat policy and address some of the concerns that not only my family is facing, but many other families are facing here in this community that may not be reaching out to you directly, but I can tell you as a parent, I hear it quite frequently because they have a child in a daycare that's provided for that particular school, and they are also having to pay buy a seat. So I hope you guys take this into consideration.
All right, thank you. All right, that was the only public comment we have scheduled. We will move.
Thank you. A few things that I want to highlight. I'll start with some upcoming days of appreciation for different school staff. April 27th, which is coming up later this week, is Administrative Professionals Day. Next week on May 1st is School Principals Day. And the first full week of May is National Teachers Appreciation Week. May 6th is School Lunch Hero Day. May 11th, School Nurse Day, and May 13th, School Communicators Day. So we have a number of upcoming either days or weeks of celebration and appreciation for a variety of staff members across the school district. Our staff across the district do a great job at what they do, and it's important for us on a daily basis to recognize the work that they do and also to help celebrate those days that are designated to show appreciation for our hardworking staff. We recently had Art Immersion Day, where 4 Northside 6th graders were selected to attend the Oconomowoc Performing Arts Center for the Art Immersion Day. They took part in based activities throughout the day. We have a few additions to Milton High School student body for the next few weeks. Our French exchange students arrived this past weekend. So students and a teacher from France have joined us for a 3-week cultural exchange. The students will attend school and participate in activities with their host siblings. And they arrived last weekend and will be here until early May. Milton High School has been hosting students from France for these short-term visits for the past 15 years. And these programs help create lifelong friendships and build cultural and global awareness for our student body. We had an exciting event at one of our softball games last week. Sophomore pitcher Gwen Baker threw a perfect game. 7 innings with giving up no runs, no walks, and no errors. So congratulations to Gwen and to the whole team. That isn't just a one-person event. They had excellent team defense throughout the game, and Gwen also had 6 strikeouts. So congratulations to Gwen and the softball team at Milton High School for that outstanding achievement. A couple things happening at Milton West. We had Milton High School students come and work with each grade level at West for National Ag Day, Earth Day, and elementary literacy over the past week. So it's great to have those high school students in our elementary schools. I think it provides a great opportunity for learning for our elementary students, but also is an opportunity for our high school students to learn by presenting information about the activities that they take part in. We also had National Honor Society students in our elementary schools reading earlier today, reading to students. And also at Milton West, our kindergarten and first grade spring sing takes place tomorrow. At Milton Middle School, also tomorrow, is an event called the Reality Maze, and there will be 24 community members involved in a simulation activity to help students learn about responsibility and outcomes from different decisions that they can make. So I'm looking forward to and some of our other district staff and other staff throughout the district are going to be at Milton Middle School throughout the day to help out with that, as well as those community volunteers. 3rd graders at Harmony are participating in a virtual tour of the Cave of the Mounds. Some venues aren't open up to groups for field trips yet, so we're looking for ways to provide opportunities through interactive technologies so students can learn from those local experts. And at Consolidated, students will be participating in the annual seed stomping that took place this past week. Students had harvested seeds from the school prairie back in the fall. They went out into the prairies to stomp the seeds last week. And we're very grateful to Catherine Owens, a former Consolidated parent, for her longtime commitment to maintaining our prairie and providing this opportunity for the students at Consolidated. And the last thing that I want to update the board on is last week I attended the State Superintendent's Conference. Some highlights included sessions on addressing student mental health needs, fostering success for all students, different aspects of school law and use of data, and meeting the needs of students with disabilities. A key takeaway from the conference is that many other districts, both large and small districts across the state, are seeing some of the same things that we're seeing and moving in some of the same directions that we're moving on a lot of these different topics. So it was a nice opportunity to gain some information, hear from things that are happening in other districts, and touch base with other superintendents across the state.
If not, we thank you for that, Mr. Dahman, and we will move on. Joint committee report from the Finance and Transportation Committees that Dave and I partnered on. I guess there are 3-person committees, and we were missing a 3rd person for each committee, so we soldiered through and got through it. I'm going to segue to Dave and touch the transportation pieces. There's a bit of overlap on all the topics, so give us a quick overview, Dave, if you would.
Okay, one of the items we had, myself. The first item that we discussed, and Carrie's here to give us some additional background in it, is there is the addition of a charter school coming to Milton, the Servant Leaders Christian Academy. They have made a request to us as it relates to transportation. So, Carrie, I see you're up at the podium. I don't know if you want to touch upon it beyond what is in the package here, but what we're being asked to do tonight is approve their request. So, Carrie, any additional thoughts on that?
I just want to clarify, they're not a charter school, but they are a private school.
Private school?
And for private schools in our district, there's a process for them to go through to request transportation. And the first step of that process is for them to tell us what their boundaries are and for the Board of Ed to approve or affirm those boundaries. Then the next steps is they will inform us by May 15th of students eligible, and then we'll work with a bus company to have those students added to our routes. Just as an information item from talking to them about the process, they are open to aligning their calendar to ours as well as start and end times so that we can make this work. So that's a very, very positive. And I think they only had a couple students that they were anticipating needing transportation. But what you're doing tonight is outlined in state statute, and you obviously are obliged to follow the law.
So if there's any questions on that, we can certainly entertain that. But this first 3A is primarily in the transportation component of this. So Joe, if you have any additional comments from you, certainly feel free to put them in. Otherwise, I will make a motion. All right. I move to approve as requested the private school boundary for Servant Leaders Christian Academy Milton to be the same as the school district of Milton.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion on the floor from Dave, seconded by Rick, as you just heard, to approve the boundary request from a new private school in our district called the Servant Leaders Christian Academy. Are there questions on that motion? I see none.
Quick
Oh,
question.
go ahead, John.
What's the timeline, Carrie, for this approval to final approval for the bus routes?
So with regard to the process, state law says they have to make the request by April 1st, which they did, and that establishes these boundaries that you will act on. Then by May 15th, they need to tell us the students that they believe are eligible, and then we'll verify they're eligible. And then in the fall, when we look at the routes, we'll figure that piece out. We also need to finish coordinating those start and end times as well. So I think it's we'll see where the students live and kind of figure out which routes work best when we're looking at capacity and time, and then suggest start and end times accordingly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, motion on the floor then to vote on is to approve the Servant Leaders Christian Academy boundary request. All in favor of that, signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? That clearly passes.
Okay, I will reach out and inform them of your decision, and we'll work on those next steps. Thank you.
All right, next item, 3B, is a summary of the usually hazardous transportation plan. This is how.
Dave, you're muted, Dave.
All right, back up a step. Item 3B on the agenda is the unusually hazardous transportation plan. There's a PowerPoint in board docs that addresses that, but I would reference everyone who's following along the component that is most pertinent to this discussion is on slide 4, talking about the criteria that would signify an area or a pickup to be an unusual hazard. This is an item that gets reviewed annually. Mrs. Kramer had shared with us the discussion that happens at the district level and then goes on to Milton Police Department or Rock County Police Department, depending where it will be, for their input and ability to provide us some feedback on those as well. After these items have been addressed, items that need to be, again, there's no sidewalk for a pickup or these types of things are integrated into the transportation plan, which is done in conjunction with Right Way as well. This is not an action item, but was more of a review of where the process is. An item that, Joe, I know that we had talked about in the committee was hopefully the timeline being concise enough that if there are changes that there's plenty of time to communicate those to the district families that fall within those before the start of what I presume would be generally the fall school year. But again, the PowerPoint describes most of those items.
Any questions on that piece? And I see none, so thank you for that, Dave, and I guess you can probably stay
Sure. Okay.
in charge here, and we'll roll on to C. Discussion and possible action on the buy a seat rates for 2022-2023.
Yep. Let me make sure I'm not muted. Okay. So the buy a seat program, as was shared earlier and in the packet today, has been in place for a number of years. Essentially what it does is attempts to provide an accommodation for transportation, oftentimes to childcare and things like this. In discussions with Right Way, and as you'll see in the memo, there are costs associated with providing transportation, as we know. And what this does is defer part of the cost. The full cost per child is significantly higher than this. And what this is our attempt to do, hopefully successfully, is defray some of the cost, but not fully load the cost onto any individual student or family. The effort in past years has been to try to, instead of leaving this untouched and not discussed for a number of years, is to more, for lack of a better term, try to index it to inflation and transportation. And so what you'll see here is an action item, is that, again, attempt to still subsidize the program through the general transportation and yet try to keep pace with inflation for the buy a seat program. If there's any questions that Joe is in attendance as well, we can try to answer those for you, or Gary, Rich, if there's any additional comments, certainly feel free to chime in.
Well, sure. How many families do partake in buy a seat, roughly?
So no, in board docs, it looks like this year we had 134 families and a total of 171 children participating.
Okay.
One thing, John, that we had talked about that made it hard to compare was with part of the year being virtual last year, the comparative of 93 to 171 children and 75 to 134 families. It was hard to make comparative data just because of the unique circumstances of the other one. So while the data is presented accurately, it's hard to make conclusions from it based on what's simply there. If there's no other questions, I would move to increase the annual buy a seat program round trip free to $240, one-way fee to $120, and increase the family cap to $480.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion on the floor from Dave, seconded by Rick, as you just heard, to amend our via-seat rates for the coming year. Are there questions relative to that motion? And I see none. All in favor of approval of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you, that motion is approved. And one last piece of that committee was for Ms. Carey to update us. Here we go. The Community Service Fund, Fund 80, has a bit of an update.
Since I've been here, we haven't talked about the community service fund just as a single topic and everything going on.
Carrie, you're muted.
Thank you. There we go. So in the last couple of years, we have not talked about the community service fund as a whole, other than to talk at a high level about the tax levy and some of those pieces. So I thought this would be a good time for us just to walk through what it is and how it works and what services are being provided with the revenues for the program. So the first piece we start with in the slide presentation is the state statute that authorizes the Board of Education to maintain and establish community education and training, recreational, cultural, athletic programs and services, which are outside of the regular curriculum. And there also have to be outside of our extracurricular programs for students enrolled in the district. And so the key takeaway is around the idea of eligible costs for Fund 80. So it's not around revenues. It is what are you eligible to spend in the Community Service Fund. And it really needs to be costs outside of our regular district activities and our regular curriculum. So that is a key piece when you're talking about Fund 80. These are things outside of our normal operations. What we do here in Milton is we operate and maintain 2 community parks. And so we did talk about Fund 80 when we did the levy with the acquisition of Central Park and the current improvements to the park. We also have MRAC activities for youth and adults. And then we also support 2 community resources. We support Milton House community programs as well as the Milton Area Youth Center programs. And so if you go to the next piece, you can see the majority of our spending, 3/4 this year, is on the community parks. About 13% are for MREC activities. 8% of the costs are for MREC foundation operations, right, or just the basic things that we need to run the program, beside the additional cost of the activities. And then about 3% are for those community resources that we have identified. So that's where the money goes. And where does the money come from? MRAC, that 13% is typically supported by participant fees for the MRAC activities. We have some community park rentals, but by and large, the greatest source of our funding in the Community Service Fund is our tax levy. So what you are used to seeing is the next slide, and that is information that has been pulled when we adopt the budget. And it's at a very high level where we talk about the Community Service Fund revenues and expenditures. In that top box, you can see that we do have a fund balance. We're carrying a bit of a balance. We anticipate likely using some of that in the current year or the following year to continue with the Central Park improvements. But then the other to take note is where the red arrow is, right, is there's a whole separate levy. So of our, what do we have here? 19,700,000 this year was for community service. The prior year, it was closer to 300. And if you recall, that increase was around those improvements to Central Park. So did you have any questions about the Community Service Fund at the high level here?
Carrie, more of a comment, and then we had talked about this in the committee, but I think it bears repeating. You know, as I sometimes talk to people in the community, they'll bring up some of the expenses related to this and talk about individual priorities and things like this. And I always try to remind those folks that this fund is a separate silo from the Fund 10 and general operations. And so when the levy is set, there's the silo of the expenses in this, and then the silo of expenses in these other funds, namely 10, and they don't cross over. So by funding one, it isn't costing the other, and vice versa. So I don't know if maybe you could just take a moment, just kind of, I guess, touch upon that again. But again, I know we talked about it in the committee, and again, I think it's just important to say it again for the purpose of the board and this group as well.
Right, and I think you're absolutely correct, and I'm glad you brought that up. As you know, 80% of our revenues for general operations are covered by the revenue limit or controlled revenue. So with the community service fund, that is outside revenue limits. It's the levy is outside revenue limits, as are the activities, because we don't use it for general fund operations. So it kind of makes sense that the two that we can't use the Fund 80 levy for general operations. But also another way of saying it is the activities in the community service fund are not competing with our general operations because it's outside the revenue limit. Is that where you're going?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's no action on this item, but Joe, I've monopolized most of this discussion. So if there's anything additionally you'd like to add, please do so.
You did a wonderful job summarizing that. Rich, you had something?
Just one thing that I wanted to share. I thought it would be important for the board and the community to get an update on what's been happening and especially what's coming up with our MREC program. A lot of those activities take place in the summer. So we've invited our MREC coordinator, Lance Knudsen, to attend the second school board meeting in May to give the board an update on some of the programs that are offered through our MREC program.
Wonderful. We look forward to that. And that's the committee's full report for the most part. Any questions on any of those pieces? Otherwise, thank you, Carrie. And we will soldier on. And I'm unmuted. As I transition to new business, Mr. Tukendorf has made his way to the podium. A is a Dean Health Insurance update from Chris.
Okay, I will walk through the memo that is in your board packet and outline that the purpose of the memo is to share the history of our health insurance plan. We are not looking for any action this evening. Our objective is to incorporate a multi-year strategy to better manage costs associated with medical claims, which is the cost of the claims, and medical trend, which is the cost of providing these services. Historically, the medical trend has exceeded the traditional CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The financial pressures of the medical trend are challenging as we recognize the district's revenues do not always keep pace with the CPI or the inflation. As we navigate the medical trend increases year to year, it is important to consider how changes will potentially impact staff. In an effort to combat the medical trends, the district must intentionally plan and implement strategies to manage our medical trend by incorporating mindful plan design changes, as well as engage our employees in more proactive wellness opportunities and promote consumerism among healthcare options. We've made plan design changes in 2015-2016 plan year when we introduced the health reimbursement arrangement, the HRA, to staff. And then in 2020-2021 plan year, an insurance carrier changed from offering Dean and Mercy to Dean alone. Through these changes, we were able to control our medical trend costs. The 2022-2023 renewal and negotiating process began in December of 2021, with USI and Dean with these conversations continuing into this month. Through this process, we have reviewed the claims data, loss ratio, and medical trend and determined that plan design changes need to be made. As we review our health insurance plan options, we have compared our current coverage and options with other districts in the Badger Conference. In the Badger Conference, the average employee deductible cost is $450 for a single plan and $900 for a family plan. USI and Dean shared input and recommendation on these changes to administration, that there needs to be an understanding of what area districts are offering so that we can offer competitive benefits as compared to the market. In addition, we need to manage long-term sustainability of the health insurance plans being offered, and the status quo HRA plan is not sustainable in the long term. Al Yeager at USI has shared that the increase of employee contributions is a one-year fix, but doesn't address the long-term need for the sustainability. We will be having the same conversation next year with the prediction of a potential 6.9% rate increase for the 23-24 year. And then in your memo, it's linked to the Milton Badger Conference comparables. And then as we move through the memo, we are recommending an increase to single and family deductibles and changes to prescription drug copays, with no increase to employee premium contributions. So you'll see on the right side of the memo in red that there's an employee out-of-pocket $600, which is an increase of $500 from the current plan today. The prescription drug tiers would be changing to 10, 35, 60, and 100. And then moving to the family HRA plan, employee out-of-pocket would be $1,200, which is an increase of $1,000. And the prescription drug tiers would be the same as the single plan, 10, 35, 60, and $100. And then moving on to the HSA plan, because the school district of Milton has an HRA plan with the majority of its staff under, and then a newly introduced HSA plan as of last July. This plan would be changing from a point of service plan to an HMO, which has no out-of-network option other than the referral process that an employee or their family member would need to go through with Dean. The Benefits Advisory Group met on March 25th and April 7th to talk through potential health insurance options for the 22-23 plan year. During these conversations, the group reviewed 3 potential options that were shared with the Board of Education during the April 11th board meeting. The Human Resources Committee will be meeting on this coming Wednesday, the 27th, and we will review feedback received from staff members and bring forth these recommendations during our May 9th board meeting. The Human Resources Department is also working on its second newsletter that will be shared out with staff this week and will be highlighting changes that are being explored. We are also working with Al Yeager and his team on creating a PowerPoint presentation that will have a voice overlay explaining each of the slides and providing background information on these changes. So that's the memo in a nutshell. If you have any questions before I go on to the next agenda item. And again, this is not, we're not looking for any kind of board action tonight, but merely an update sharing the history of the documentation.
Chris, a question on the HSA plan. On the red part, the no out-of-network option other than referral. I know this is a question that often comes up in circles about what does it mean if you're traveling? What if it means if you have a college student that lives in an area that doesn't have a deemed provider and these types of things? As part of the presentation that's pending, will those questions be answered as part of that, as far as how that works, or what's the status of that, I guess?
Absolutely. We'll definitely be incorporating that question into the slides, Dave. And one of the points was that Dean and USI have shared is that if you have an adult dependent, maybe going to college or out of the network area, they would still be treated as in the network, but they would be underneath the PPO plan. Okay, but the key is adult dependent. So they can't just be under the age of 26. They actually have to be dependent on your taxes to have coverage, so you can use those claims towards that. But it would be very similar to exactly the same as the HRA, Because currently we have staff members that students attend college in other states. And as long as they're reaching out to Dean, Dean establishes that network for them. Under the HSA, I've been told from USI and Dean that continues. As long as the staff member is reaching out to Dean and establishing that PPO network for that individual. But again, the key component on the HSA, not the HRA, the HSA is that they have to be an adult dependent that you're claiming on your taxes to be able to use those expenses to come out of the HSA. So, but we will go into that on those slides.
Chris, you said the family increase will be $1,000?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes, that is correct. That's what we're looking at right now, Shelley. Now, that's the family plan, I should say, for the employee out of pocket. The prescription drug tiers, that's really subjected to what you need for prescription drugs. Currently, Al and his team has shared that we have 80% of our employees utilize tier 1, which is there's no increase from the current plan as it stands now to what we're proposing.
So looking at that same family plan for the HRA, the $1,000 increase, that's in addition to the $1,000 in-network deductible?
Nope, that's the actual, that's the same piece.
1,000?
Because the HRA has a health reimbursement arrangement that's associated with that. So if you look at the 21-22 information, you will see that the in-network deductible is $4,000 for a family. And then there's an HRA reimbursement amount of $3,800. So if I have a family plan, my spouse, my kids are all underneath there, each person has a $2,000 deductible. But then as we incur expenses throughout the year, it caps out at $4,000. The first $200 is mine out of pocket. The other $3,800, I can ask the HRA to be reimbursed for. So really my out of pocket is $200. Now, switching to what we're looking at for the potentially upcoming year, that would be then increased to by $1,000. So my first out of pocket would be $1,200 under this scenario.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chris? Otherwise, we'll invite him to stay on board here and we will jump down.
Chris, has there been any talk of sort of an intermediary step or an intermediate step? As I look at this, if we went right, just using what you were just talking about with the family plan, if you were the insurance carrier for the family and you were a district employee, that could really wipe out pretty much the raise they're going to get in this coming year.
Potentially. Yes, potentially. Not knowing if we're talking about a support staff employee or a teacher, and the teacher negotiations are still ongoing.
Right.
So with that, you would be looking at $1,000, and then with the prescription drug tiers, like I mentioned earlier, it would depend if you were taking that $100 tier, or that your prescription drugs would apply to that $100 tier. That could be a scenario that an individual could experience.
I'm just wondering if there has been any talk, or is there a plan to talk about not making the jump so drastic, at one point?
And we've had some high-level conversations about that, Mike, to the point where we haven't. That's why this is not an action item for this evening. We're still exploring that and still talking about it. We want to look at having another benefits advisory group meeting prior to our May 9th board meeting. High-level conversations, nothing definite though.
Okay.
Chris, I want to verify. We have a HR committee meeting scheduled for next week, Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. And the following Wednesday.
And the following Wednesday, and putting this on the agenda for one or both of those meetings prior to the May 9th meeting would be something that we could talk through. We talked about potentially not having another benefits advisory group meeting, but having the ability to bring more information on this issue to the HR committee.
Okay, very good, Chris. We will transition to item B, which is discussion and possible action on 2022-23 professional staff FTE baseline.
Okay, thank you, Joe. This memo, I will give you a little bit higher level overview of it, very similar to what we have done last year with the teaching staff and the administrators and the supervisors, is outline what we've currently had approved. So if you look underneath the teachers, you'll see that last year, June 14th, 2021, the Board of Education had approved 257.7 FTE. And then as the summer went on, the Board of Education on August 23rd had approved a 0.12 FTE for music and art teachers at Northside. And then from August 9th through December 13th, and again in January 10th of this year, the Board of Education had approved one-year positions too. And then as we work to identify the needs for the upcoming year, I'll jump first to the 3.26. You'll notice that negative 3.26 is different than the 3.0. There was a 0.26 that was previously approved by the Board of Education, but that was done before June 14th of 2021. So that 0.26 is wrapped up in the 257.7 initial baseline. And then you'll see per the conversations that administration has had with the Board of Education is also with staff, the negative 4.0 FTE aligning staff with lower student counts, and that has been achieved through attrition. And so what the administration is asking for the board to potentially approve is 253.44 FTE. And then you'll see the administrators have been broken out from the supervisors. You have 19 FTE for administration and 5 for the supervisors.
Any questions on that for Chris?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I'm in opposition of this, and I have been all along. I feel that we need to keep our positions, our staff numbers as what they are currently for this school year, in order to provide the opportunities for high school students and other students that are affected by this, through class choices and offering more than one section if there's number warrant for that. Also, with our schools coming up and still feeling the effects of the COVID pandemic, positions need at least be kept at current status in order to provide the social, emotional, and academic needs of our kids. By not eliminating, but not filling positions, that I just feel is not okay right now at this current time with what we're dealing with the world of education and what's happening with our kids and our staff and the whole big picture. That's my feelings on it.
I too am struggling a bit because less teachers means less options for kids, and I think we should be in the business of offering as many possibilities to kids as we can, staying financially and fiscally responsible, of course, but so I'm struggling with this a bit also.
I'm kind of new to this, but what's the impact? I mean, what exactly are we losing, or what are the kids missing out on? I mean, is there a way to really define that? I mean, as far as what Shelley might refer to?
I can share some things on that. The decrease in the FTE among our staff has been, we've identified ways to do that through attrition. So there aren't any teachers that will need to be non-renewed through this. And it's tied to our enrollment. We actually every year look at our enrollment, our current enrollment and our projected enrollment, and set the number of sections that are needed at our elementary schools. And at the schools or the levels where we're looking at these reductions, we're seeing a 91 fewer students for next year compared to this year. 24 of those in grades K3. So we'll be having one fewer section in grades K3 with 24 fewer students. So we'll actually see our average class size go down at our K3 schools because the number of students that we're declining in enrollment is smaller than our current average class size. We've been working with K3 principals to identify where those needs are for the number of sections. This current year we have 48 sections. So next year with this reduction of 1, we would have 47. And there's, of course, those sections are spread out across 4 grade levels, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grades, and across our 4 different elementary schools at Consolidated, Harmony, Milton East, and Milton West. So again, we don't anticipate this having a negative impact on our students. We anticipate very similar average class sizes across those grade levels to what we have this year, and even a little decrease in the average class sizes. At Northside, we're also seeing a projected decline in enrollment at Northside of 22 students, which is just a shade lower than our average class size at Northside. So the plan at Northside is that we would have 1 fewer section needed there. They're seeing, and at all of these grade levels, the projected decrease in enrollment is from larger groups moving out of that system and smaller groups moving in to replace them. At a district level, that's a large senior class graduating and a smaller incoming kindergarten class. At the K3 level, it's an incoming kindergarten class that's smaller than the 3rd grade that's moving to 4th grade. At Northside, we have a larger 6th grade class that's moving to 7th grade and a smaller 4th grade class that's replacing them. So again, at Northside, with an anticipated loss of 22 students, we would need 1 less section at Northside. We aren't looking to make any changes in the number of staff at the middle school. The middle school average class size is a little bit smaller than at Northside this year. With the increase in enrollment at the middle school for next year, we do anticipate that average class size would go up at the middle school. And at the high school, with a larger class graduating and a smaller 8th grade class moving into 9th grade, we anticipate 45 fewer students at the high school, which is about a 4.3% decrease in the number of students. We are looking to reduce 2 positions at the high school. Again, those are replacements through retirements or resignations, so it wouldn't be having to non-renew a teacher. And those are in the English and the science department. In working with Principal Bill Horn at the high school, he identified those as the areas to make those reductions. And then he's been working with the staff and with student registration to identify which courses we'd be able to offer and not be able to offer. We've had a history of offering some extremely small classes at the high school, and there's some advantages to that because we want to offer opportunities for students, and we would still be able to offer a large number of opportunities for students. But in the past, we've had this current year about 17% of our classes at the high school have 15 or fewer students, down to some that have even between 5 and 8 students. So some of those classes might have to be offered on an every other year basis rather than every year, depending on how many students are interested in enrolling in those classes. There may be some classes where there may be students who are wishing to take a class and we aren't able to offer it, but that's not unusual for our high school or for other high schools too. And we just have to look at keeping that average class size for next year. And at the high school, it would go down from 21.9 to 21.8, which is a little bit smaller than at Northside or at the middle school, and still very reasonable for an average class size at a high school. I don't know if that answered your question, John?
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Do we know, Rich, or maybe this would be a Jeremy question too, I don't know. You mentioned classes that might have to be offered every other year instead of every year. Do we know of, has that been established yet? Like, what are those classes, and are there classes that are only going to be offered?
Principal Bill Horn, do you want to speak to that?
And I guess along that same line, Jeremy, are there classes that are just being cut, like that aren't going to be offered to students, period?
And I think it's important just to mention too, we're still in the middle of the registration process. So students are arena scheduling still through this week. And as we do some wrap up of students who didn't choose to schedule, I'm still about 3 weeks out before I have firm numbers, and then I'll do reshuffling and some courses I'll choose not to run because of numbers. The question about courses that are every other year, for example, we are actually offering some of our AP courses now every other year to make sure that we have larger, a fuller section each year within the science. So AP Chemistry, AP Environmental Science, AP Physics, and AP, I'm going to forget it, Biology. We'll be offering a life science and physical science each year, but those will be alternating every other year. We've been doing some of this with some music electives. We've been doing some of this with some face electives already. Those are some changes that we're making. Courses that we are eliminating are, I will not run any sections of forensic science next year. Will be one example of a course I'm not running next year.
Sorry, and that's the only class that you know of that's currently being offered that's not going to be offered?
That's a course that I chose not to put into a schedule because of staffing levels. I am still going to be rearranging once students have finished with the scheduling process. There's a big shift around to make sure that we balance courses, and that there'll be different information then. So I'm still about 2 to 3 weeks out from that.
Go ahead, sorry.
And in the science realm, was there a class that I know a teacher retired and
forensic science, Ms. Schmidt taught
that was the forensic science class? Thank you.
So by offering the AP science classes every other year, that gives them less opportunity if they can't fit them in their schedule. So isn't our goal to have kids be taking AP classes and being able to?
It is. Some of those numbers we're beginning to, we actually started this process a year ago. So we've been highlighting for students, they know when the courses are going to be offered, so they know when to plan around that. And again, we also offer, so there's a life science or a physical science each year. AP Physics or AP Chemistry are alternate years. Each of those are physical science. The same thing with environmental and AP Biology. Environmental is not a life science, but we alternate those two opposite each other. But we're able to offer the fuller section then by doing it that way. And we're able to staff that then.
Thank you, Jeremy. And the one other thing that I want to share is of our 4 core areas at the high school, the math department and the social studies department currently have 7 full-time teachers. With this change, it would bring the English and science departments in line with the math and social studies departments with 7 full-time teachers. And we also are looking at an option of adding a couple additional classes in the English department, depending on how the staffing plays out. So it would be a 7-point something, actually. It wouldn't be a full 1.0 reduction in English, depending on how the staffing plays out.
Okay, any other questions for Rich, Chris, each other, et cetera? This is a potential action item, as you have seen with the memo.
I'll make a motion to that 253.44 teacher FTE, 19.0 administrative FTE, and 5.0 supervisor FTE be the professional staffing baseline used for the 2022-23 school year. Any additional FTE not listed in the baseline will be subject to board policy 3111 and brought forward to the board for review and possible approval.
Joe, do we have a roll call?
Certainly. I need a second first.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a properly moved and seconded motion on the floor. As you just heard, I will not reread it. You can all see it there in front of you. And as requested from Shell, we will roll call it. And I will start on my right as a random piece for the motion on the floor, which I changed my mind. I will reread it for clarity. So
Rick's motion and Dave seconded that we establish a professional staffing baseline of 253.44 teacher FTE, 19.0 administrative FTE, and 5.0 supervisor FTE for the 2022-23 school year. Additional FTE not listed in the baseline will be subject to Board Policy 3111 and brought forward to the board for review and possible approval. So, having said that, I will vote from the right, and it is Dave. Yes. And John.
Yes.
Joe is yes. Mike.
No.
Rick.
Yes.
And Shelley.
No.
That is 4 yeses and 2 noes. That motion passes. Thank you. And not finished with Mr. Tupendorf yet. Yes, we are.
Okay, the last item is the summer school staffing for June of 2022. So we jump back almost a year now. On June 14th of 2021, the Board of Education approved the 2021-2022 summer school baseline of positions and hours, which encompasses July of 2021, August of 2021, and June, the June that's coming up here, of 22. Administration is confident that heading into June of 22, summer school, we will remain under the number of positions and hours approved last June. This coming June, HR will be bringing forth a summer school plan for July of 22, August of 22, and June of 23. So this is looking at that plan year that starts, or the fiscal year that the school district of Milton observes, from July all the way through the next June. So back last June, the number of positions as well as the number of hours were already pre-approved. And in your board packet, you will see, first of all, draw your attention to the letter of employment for the teachers and letter of employment for the support staff. Those are the templates that Sarah Stuckey and her team for summer school use. And then you'll see lists in the executive session notes that list that rate per hour along with all of the different teachers. And then you'll see another one for summer school support staff, which is administrative assistants, aides, special education aides, and health aides needed for this coming June. Any questions on the June hours, the June positions, or the lists? One question, I guess I will ask my own question. One question that did come up from a board member was there's a couple individuals that are listed twice. Those are because of the different assignments that those individuals had. So there's 2 teachers, I believe, that have 2 assignments, and a support staff person that has 2 different assignments, and that's why they were listed twice.
Sounds like we're back to full summer school.
We're
right now.
We're getting there. Right, Sarah?
Yeah, we're anticipating.
I'll be happy.
an increase to the FTE again this year. Most of our classes are full. So
That's good.
So in June, this coming June, we'll be talking again about July, August, and next June, and hopefully next June, we're back up where we were pre-COVID.
I'll make a motion to approve the June 2022 summer school compensation spreadsheet with the exception of the open positions.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Dave, to approve our summer school staffing request, with the exception of the opens. Questions on that motion?
Chris, the only opens were in the support staff area, correct, that I noted?
Hold on one quick sec. Let me take a quick peruse. That is correct. That is correct.
Any other questions? Otherwise, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. That motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unmute and go back to D for new business is action on 2021-22 open enrollment alternative applications, the summary of which is included in board docs.
Looks to me like one in and no out.
I would move to approve the 2021-22 open enrollment alternative applications as presented.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion from Dave, seconded by John, to approve our open enrollment alternative apps. Questions? I see none. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That motion is approved. All right, miscellaneous on the agenda. A is the staffing report, which is here again included for you.
I move to approve the staff report as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from Rick, seconded by Dave, to approve our staffing report. Are there any questions? I hear none. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The staffing report is approved. Gifts and donations is next. That list is also in front of you. I see $5,661.41 from our generous community.
I move to approve the gifts and donations with gratitude.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion from John, seconded by Dave, to approve our gifts and donations with gratitude. Any questions thereof? All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And we're done with that. So meeting dates, Mr. Dahman?
We have a couple scheduled upcoming meeting dates. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be on Monday, May 9th, 2 weeks from today. That'll be at 6:30 here in the PDC. We also have two HR committee meetings that are scheduled, one on Wednesday, April 27th, and one on Wednesday, May 4th. Those are for the purpose of negotiations with our teachers. Wednesday, April 27th, that's at 4:30 p.m., and on Wednesday, May 4th at 6:30 p.m. And both of those meetings will also take place here in the PDC.
Okay, anything else?
Do we need to look at policy?
I think that let me unmute here. Rick asked about policy, and I think we'll hold off and get committee assignments, and then in case there are some changes to the committees, and then once we have the policy committee, get something lined up.
I see no other business. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor with aye?
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you, everyone. We